Now, yesterday, the US moved a step closer to banning TikTok with a vote in the House of Representatives. The House has passed a bill that would lead to the app being banned in the US if its Chinese owner doesn't sell its US subsidiary. Let's bring in social media consultant and industry analyst Matt Navarra and Seth Schachner, the managing director at Strat Americas. A very good morning to you both. I guess late evening, depending on where in the States you guys are joining us from, for which we appreciate. Matt, I'll come to you first. In terms of what's behind this, just remind people why the US potentially wants to ban this.
Yeah, there's been some concerns from the various parts in the US government about the security of the app and the whether it potentially could be used as a tool for spying by China. It's concerned about whether user data from American users could be passed back to the Chinese government through its owner ByteDance, and really just lots of kind of theoretical concerns about what the app could do and could be bad for, but no actual evidence to suggest it's been doing it. And so this ban is a lot to do with the national security of the US and also the security of the US users' data.
So, Seth, the kind of US versus China debate has been rumbling on for quite a while, obviously, and I imagine polls relatively well in many circles. Do Americans widely feel TikTok is Chinese, and will they welcome this ban in the same way that seemingly there's cross-party allegiance in the House to ban it?
I don't think so. I think the app has just become, it's a billion people globally, and it's I think 175 in the U.S., and it's really been claimed by the youth as, a medium of expression. And so I think for sure they understand that there's political aspects behind it, but I would probably say no on that. I think it's so popular and it's become so much a part of the youth culture here that I think many of them are not ignoring it, but kind of willing to live what's going on. And I do think if that ban, does progress, and I think it's doubtful at this stage, I think there'd be quite a bit of issues with it and blowback. And so that's why you're seeing some of the waffling, with our politicians here right now.
Yeah, well, certainly still has to pass in the Senate, obviously, and a few more steps as well. But Seth, I mean, there's also a way out, which is if they sell it to a US, the US subsidiary, if they sell it to a US buyer. There was actually an attempt to do that during the Trump administration, which fell through. Is that something that people are expecting to happen?
I think, yeah, I don't know if the population in general or the user base is expecting it to happen. I think it's probably a concern if there were to be some type of what they would call deplatforming, where the app degrades over time, then people would be really upset and ticked off over it. But this idea, I think it was called Project Texas, and I want to say there was one over in Europe as well, of kind of putting it into the hands of an American owner, is something that if it could be done in a way that doesn't affect the app or the user base, feeling it, basically, that might be an optimal way to do it. I mean, the latest thing here is, I want to say Activision has been one of the parties that's been mentioned about pulling a group together. But I also think, some of these things are very tricky, slippery slopes that, the data, the infrastructure, all the concerns about moving it, I don't think it's as easy as it sounds.
Matt, talk us through who the beneficiaries would be, and I guess oddly, all of those beneficiaries probably grasp as much data as TikTok does off their users.
Well, yeah, this is going to be a big win potentially for the likes of Google with YouTube, and of course Mark Zuckerberg's Meta with Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels. And if TikTok was not to exist in its current form, which does seem some way off at the moment still, creators and social media users will probably divert themselves into rival apps. And so these apps are not have been accused of many of the same things in terms of data privacy and security as TikTok has. And also it gives them incredibly more power and more of a monopoly position in social media than they've ever had, which is something that many governments around the world have been concerned about with these social media platforms for years. So you kind of try and attempt to deal with one problem and potentially create even more with others.
Of course, it could just ban all social media and internet and allow people only to get their news from television, which would be helpful. In terms of, Matt, if this law does pass in full, which there's still a question mark, is it an easy thing technically to actually ban? I mean, Of course, in Russia and China, there's lots of apps that people try and ban, the government does, but they still communicate via Signal and other means. I mean, will the US be able to effectively ban it?
There are various ways they could do it, so I suspect that they would talk to the app store providers from Google Play, and the iOS Apple App Store, and at that point probably limit the ability for that app to be able to be downloaded again, or updates to be provided to the app, which would then eventually over time limit the ability for people to use it. There may well be workarounds using what they call a VPN to kind of get around the block, but I suspect they would have thought about that as a way of people circumventing it. But it really depends on what way they approach it. And of course, if people want something and they can't have it, it probably makes them even more desperate to try and find a way around it. So we will see a lot of that activity if it was to go down that path.
Matt and Seth, thank you both for joining us.
Good to be here.
Still to come here.